It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello, and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name's Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are discussing The Sapling Cage by Margaret Killjoy.
Yes, which I believe was recommended to us.
Alexis, would you please do the plot?
I will try. So, Lane is a young girl. She is in the process of realizing that she is a girl. Not Lane, Laurel. Lane is her best friend. And Lane is going to be taken by the witches. But her best friend Laurel, who is in the process of realizing that she is a girl, has volunteered to disguise herself as a girl to become a trainee witch so that Lane can pursue her dream of being a knight. And they do this. They do this switcheroo. It is in readers of Alana, the Alana books will recognize the swap here. And she joins the witches. It's mostly going great, with, the usual hazing. And then the witches discover that there are these titular sapling cages that are pulling all of the life force out of the woods, causing a terrible blight, but creating very powerful magic. And the process of finding out who is doing this and why and can they be stopped. And while doing this, Laurel has to figure out what will she be able to find her place in the witches' society? And if so, will she be able to do it openly as a trans girl, or will she have to pretend to be a cis girl for the rest of her life?
Will she have to get the operation?
Oh, yes. And also, at some, in the process of this, she hears about a special transition spell. And will she be able to do that? Will she have to do that? Does she want to do that? These are all the questions that she's grappling with while they're trying to hunt down the evil magic users who are putting skulls inside cages and eating all of the life force of the forests.
I would agree with most of that, except the part where you said that it was going great with the witches before the sapling cage.
I said, barring the usual hazing.
Yes, no, what the witches are is one of the fascinating things about this book. So there are lesbians? ?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Laurel strikes me as fair. There's certainly girls who are interested in girls, and our protagonist is one of them.
Laurel is a demi-romantic, a-spectrum bisexual.
Yes, but she is into girls, and the primary relationship in this book is with a girl, though unfortunately the girl might be straight.
Yes. Now, I just want to point that out because at the age of 13 or whatever, Laurel knows that she is a demi-romantic, a-spectrum bisexual.
Well, at the age of 13, she thinks that. I mean...
No, she having grown up in a small medieval village in magical fantasy, wherever, has the language to discuss this about herself, which is an important thing about this book.
Yes, this absolutely does the thing that a lot of contemporary fantasy does of basically having the character turn to face the camera and say, here is exactly how I would describe my gender and orientation by contemporary, labels.
Yes, this one has the therapy speak bad.
It does, I agree.
And are there wizards? Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, obviously.
Yes. Magic is the purview of women in this world, and men using it is considered, even by our hero, to be a perversion. But the witches, there are plenty of witches who act like wizards here, so we'll say wizards.
And they fight.
Yes, they fight. So this is, in fact, a Wizards versus Lesbians book.
Yes.
Why should you read this book?
I really think that, in general, if you read the Alana books and went... I can see, this seems like such a great premise, but really what I actually want is the story of the quote-unquote boy disguising herself as a girl to do magic instead of, basically if you wanted the story of Alana's twin brother being a trans girl and going off to study magic instead of following the girl who disguised herself as a boy to learn how to fight, then, this is the book for you.
Yes. As a person who never read the Alana books, and is in fact only hearing about them right now, I would say that the primary reason to read this book is to just keep delving into the fascinating politics that this book has to offer, because it keeps getting more interesting, even as the rest of it does not necessarily.
Yes, I do think there are a lot of problems with this book. I do think that it perhaps does have the potential to be the sort of formative experience for young trans feminine people that Tamora Pierce's first books were for young gender fluid or non-binary people.
Yes, this is also like a young adult book. We should make that clear. This is there's Harry Potter DNA in here.
And this really is a young adult book. This doesn't read like it is YA written for an audience of adult YA readers.
Yes, this book was not written with me in mind. So please keep that in mind.
Or me, honestly.
Or you. Or anybody over the age of 20. So unless you are in your second adolescence, of course. But keep that in mind when we are discussing this. Why shouldn't you read this book?
It's kind of a mess. It's definitely too long. And it's definitely, it's just kind of a mess. I think it really would have benefited from a fairly heavy editorial hand if the editor was good.
Yeah, as a book, there are problems structurally. But I just keep coming back to I remained entertained throughout. I mean, it dragged in places, obviously, but I remained entertained throughout just because I didn't know what thing was going to happen next that I was going to boggle at. So it's not boring.
It is entertaining. It's not boring, and it has the occasional it has its moments. This is never going to be one of my favorite. This is one where I love it. I didn't reread it right before recording like I often will do with books. But I can really see how someone else would. Yeah.
No, it's like, I mean, this book is, if you read the Tamora Pierce series that you were discussing, or if you, my touch point is obviously Harry Potter, because if you want something with that same kind of like bratty, kind of self-centered, stupid protagonist, magic person, but A, she's trans, and B, we're going to step-by-step refute everything that J.K. Rowling stands for and something she doesn't, then here it is, I don't need that, but somebody might.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I actually found the side characters in this one to be, I liked Didi a lot more than I liked any of Harry Potter's friends.
Oh yeah, no, a lot of the side characters are very good. It's just that the protagonist is the same kind of sort of semi-cipher obnoxious brat.
Yeah.
But we can get into that as we go.
I think that is one of the ways in which that makes this an actual YA novel as opposed to the sort of fake YA novels that are aimed at the things that are marketed as YA but are clearly written for adults. Some of which are marketed as YA over the objections of their authors. So, but the thing is that there are things about this which make me really feel like it was written for younger teenagers.
Yeah, I would say so.
And some of that is, I think, having the sort of bratty cipher.
Like I don't hate this book. I want to make that clear because I'm going to be spending a lot of time critiquing
yes.
it. But I think that it can be, for the audience that it has in mind, and I think that it has a definite audience in mind, I think this could be a fine book to receive.
Yeah. And I too am going to be reasonably critical, and so I wanted to establish that pretty strongly up front.
Yes. Content warnings. Constant peril of getting outed as trans and then getting outed as trans, like, repeatedly.
Yeah. There's misgendering, murder.
Like, murder that is perpetrated by the good guys, and generally cheered by most people.
Yeah.
This book has that interesting morality where it's squeamish about hurting animals but loves hurting bad people,
Yes.
which is another thing that we'll discuss later. We don't actually, and this is more on the part of the protagonist than on the part of the book. Particularly early on when she's a Disney princess about wildlife, but still wants to see bad people killed. Threat of torture. Actually, there is torture,
Yeah.
mutilation, and am I missing any? There's no sexual assault or anything like that.
Or threat. I don't even think it's threatened.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. So I think that's it. I'm sure we'll come up with something as we go, as we often do.
Yes.
And with that being said, let's go off to the spoiler zone.
Yeah.
Spoiler zone. So,
So this book was interesting.
this book is fascinating.
Yes, it really is. I mean, did you ever read, I know I'm going to just like keep throwing the names of books that I read as a child that you probably didn't, but did you ever read Juniper or Wise Child by Monica for something?
No, I didn't.
See, you're like, because there's some scenes in this one which are which really read to me like callbacks to the book Juniper, which is another very formative middle grade experience for me. Like, there's a lot of ways in which this does feel like it is meant to be the trans girls like distillation of all of the like 80s middle grade fantasy. 70s and 80s and 90s middle grade fantasy for girls.
And I think that the book's uncomfortable relationship with the witches is part of that.
Absolutely.
Because it's also reacting to the feminism of that era, and what parts of it wants to keep and what parts of it wants to discard.
Yes, and I think, and also just that, like, there is this sense. There's this sense of, oh, I want this too, but also it's 30, 40 years later.
It's like, oh, I want this too, but I can't ignore that a lot of the people who are the deepest into that don't want me to exist.
Or just like a lot of the other problems that are baked into the sort of nature worshipping, all, like, the true magic is not only exclusively women's, but also very anti-industrialization. Like this one, which is, there's some fascinating dancing around that issue.
I don't think it dances around that issue at all. I think that's the part it likes, and that's the part it wants to keep.
Sort of, except that, like, at the big confrontation where, they point out, look, the industrialization that we're doing, we are saving lives and democratizing magic.
Yes, but that's not a persuasive argument to anybody involved. The good guys, those are the bad guys talking, and the good guys defeat and kill the bad guys.
Yes, but the thing is that the bad guys get a moment to make their somewhat persuasive speech, and the thing that undermines the bad guys' somewhat persuasive speech is pointing out that, oh, you don't even buy into your own values.
Yeah, no, I mean, but we're talking about the moral system of like of a YA novel for tweens. The villain does get to do their villain speech, but then that villain, because when you're doing sort of didactic stuff like that, you're being like, okay, so here's the villain speech you're going to hear in real life, and here's what you point out before you kill them, to make sure that you are morally unscathed by the experience.
Yeah, that's fair. I just found it somewhat persuasive, I guess, well, of personally.
Course. But no, this is fascinating because it is opting into a nature-worshipping feminist anarcho-primitivism. This is
yes.
an-prim feminine witchery here, and it's like...
And saying that the only problem with it is that it's not trans-inclusive enough.
Exactly. It's like, no, that's the part that I like. I want into that part, and nothing says this more than the ultimate arc of our main character Laurel, who because the single funniest scene in the book is then mirrored and referenced in the end, right?
With the boar,
with the fawn, First of all,
Oh yeah,
it becomes a bore in the mirrored scene because the book is actually not, down enough with its principles
to
to have her
slaughter a
slaughter
fawn.
a fawn in cold blood at the end, even though that's the point it wants to be making.
The boar slaughter. I gotta say, the fawn slaughtering scene is very similar, or the failure, and then the actual slaughtering of the boar again, like that that really felt to be like a callback to Juniper.
Fascinating. I love
Where
that.
she is forced to slaughter her only friend, the pig, because the somewhat anarcho-primitivist witch who is training her in magic is like, well, otherwise we're not going to eat this winter, so.
Yes, these are hard truths of the kind that get doled out when it's time for the family dog to be put down, etc. The way the world really works. This book acknowledges that some witches are vegan, but sort of looks askance at them. The but the point being that at the very first part of the book, Laurel is the most princessy that she will ever be over the course of this entire thing.
Yes.
Absolutely embodying a gendered archetype, the T, where in her wet dress she throws herself bodily on this trembling fawn to protect it from the depredations of her witch mentor, which is a great scene. A great scene. I
Yes.
really enjoyed it. But then by the end, because she's grown up and learned the ways of the world, she is able to slaughter a boar herself.
Though then she's like, never doing that again.
Yes.
Like, it's interesting because, her witch mentor wants to slaughter the fawn because she's hungry. But Laurel is slaughtering the boar mostly to make a point. She's
Yes.
not actually doing it because she's hungry. So, again, the values there are just really weird.
No, I would say that given that these events essentially bookend this narrative, and this is it's like, here's the character arc from scene A to scene B. The character arc of Laurel is, yes, I'm a woman, but no, I'm not a faggot.
Ouch, but yes.
I mean, that's the
Yeah.
only way that I can read it, frankly, is like, this is one of those like trans feminine works, and in fact feminist works, that really doesn't have much but contempt for femininity.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. None of the women in here are feminine, really. Like, none of the ones that you're supposed to be aspiring to.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. And like the evil women, the ones who turn out to be evil, the witches who are on the side of the cagers, or is that what they're called?
Probably, I don't.
Yeah.
That's what we can certainly call them that. I think they
Yeah.
had a different name, but
They're the people. There's a faction of people who want to democratize magic, by essentially industrializing it,
yes,
and with that comes the concomitant destruction of nature and the sacrifice of people, as we know, and but also it allows you to have things like medicine that the modern medicine that can heal people's wounds without them having to be magic users. It takes everything out of balance, and that's what the bad guys want to do. And but the some of the witches think that this is a good idea, and those are the ones who want to use magic to do handy labor saving things like automatically stirring the pot. You would say
right.
it's the washing machine,
Yes,
it's the labor saving devices for feminine labor that the evil people are introducing to femininity or to womanhood. And it's the fact that there's a sort of a weakness in the feminine character that might want this, that is part of what is held in contempt here.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, of course, also the sapling cages allow men to work magic.
Exactly, which no good. This book 100%, 100% buys into there was a pre-modern paradise which was goddess worshipping canard, which is not really a theory that anybody believes who seriously studies these things anymore. I just want to point that out. in case it hasn't been pointed out already. But this book is all in on that. But
it's interesting because despite this, one of the ways that this does not, one of the things that this does not buy into that's really common in the literature that this draws so much of its DNA from is the monarchy. I mean, it's okay with the barony because that's, fairly small scale. So, so it's not like the hereditary power that's the problem. The barony is fine, but monarchy is bad. Like, again, it's anarchist.
The thing about the barony is that the baron also is in the process of land redistribution.
Yes.
Another thing that this book seems to believe is that before the Industrial Revolution happened, we were just on the verge of socializing everything, because that's a natural process of history. But the power consolidation involved in industrialization fucked all of that up. But
it really was kind of the opposite because they enclosed the commons.
Yes. Let us speak not of how wackadoo this is in light of the history of the world that we live in. But in this case, it turns out that everything was going peacefully and naturally into anarcho-syndicalism, and the baron and the good baron was like, "Yep, it's definitely time for me to stop collecting taxes from all you people and just like live out my life like a normal rich person instead of an insanely rich person." And it's the ambitious duchess who wants to become queen who is in the death throes of rightism is ruining everything. Mm-hmm. By cheating, essentially, by using science. So that's a take.
Yes. It's really interesting because, I would have definitely expected that something that comes out these days would be more skeptical, would have the skepticism of monarchy. But this sort of it still comes down in favor of these like knightly orders, and it really wants, I think part of it is that it really wants all of the romance of these things, but not actually to really face the social costs. Though it does point out that when everyone else gets pardoned, the outlaw knights, who are mostly, as far as I can tell, devoted to annoying people, they don't get pardoned because, among other things, they're real annoying. That's part of like their creed.
I loved that. I mean, if we shouldn't spend all of this time talking about the book's weird politics, because there are parts of it that I genuinely liked.
I liked the Outlaw Knights a lot, actually. I found them really charming. Yeah,
the Anarchist Knights. Again, this book is very pro-anarchists, but the Outlaw Knights are fun. I love the idea that a knight would take a vow of chastity because he's ace.
Yes.
That makes it far easier for him to, he doesn't have to explain it. He can just be like, "Yep, vow of chastity. Sorry,
vow of chastity,
I'd really
sorry.
like to," but that's a good joke.
That was good. Yeah.
I like his, I will not use edged weapons, and so I'll just, throw stones at people's heads thing. Very fun character.
Yes. It is sort of funny that like one of the most fun characters in this extremely feminist book is in fact a man.
Well, I think it has this in common with the feminism that it is reacting to and adding to and in conversation with, is that being a woman is still miserable. But in a morally sort of upright kind of a way.
But you do get magic.
Yes, exactly. No, the consolation of being a woman is being right.
Yes. But you have to work for it.
You really have to work for it.
If it were easy, it would actually be immoral.
Exactly. You have to suffer for it. But at the end of the day, you are correct both about yourself and about the world.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious of what the next two books in this trilogy are going to do, because because this really does have a lot of things in common with radical feminism. It's just, very committed to trans inclusivity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, As the book says, nature abhors most absolutes.
Yes.
I can tell that the author really wanted to say that nature abhors absolutes and then thought of the, only a Sith deals in absolutes tweet. And then was like, wait a minute, there's a logical problem with this statement. Nature abhors most absolutes. So, and since nature abhors most absolutes, we cannot absolutely say that that radical feminism will always become trans-exclusive radical feminism, or that radical feminism will always find a lot politically in common with far-right and neo-Nazi movements. Just that it happens a lot. That's all.
Right, but this really seems to be painting this picture of what it could look like if it doesn't.
Exactly. And what it does is what that picture looks like is you have to go out into the woods.
Right. And kill your own deer. And
exactly. And it's not going to be a right-wing survivalist movement. It's just going to be feminist.
But of course, you can really see how this would appeal, to a 13-year-old.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You go out into the woods and you have magic.
Yes. And, and
it turns out if you hate being surrounded by all of the magical women in the woods, you can go and join the, gender neutral group that doesn't have magic but gets to throw rocks at people's heads.
Yeah, you can go live in the pirate house instead.
Yep. Which is what Deity does.
I like Deity. I mean,
me too.
All of the the coterie of miserable tweens that Laurel is surrounded by. I like them all.
Yes.
Their distressing tendency to laser focus in on exactly what their emotions are and then explain them,
yes,
as one would to an idiot, to Laurel aside. But of course, one has to explain it as if to an idiot because Laurel is in fact an idiot.
Right. I mean, there's the thing where, yes, this book definitely has a bad case of therapy speak, but also Laurel is just really dense. And
yes,
you can kind of see, and you can actually see when the characters are talking to each other, they skip over a lot of this stuff. And I mean, obviously some of this is because they're, this is supposed to sort of create the sense of, suspense or whatever. But it also just sort of works to have this idea of, no, the only reason that everyone is using therapy speak is they have to do it with Laurel, because if you don't spell out everything exactly, she's just completely clueless. She's like, why are you not having as much fun as I am?
Yes. I think that my favorite example of this is the bit where, I forget who it is, but she doesn't like Laurel. And they're hanging out by themselves finally. And she goes, I don't know why I don't like you. But the thing is, I don't like men. And you're obviously not a man. But I dislike you in exactly the same way that I dislike men. Why would that be?
Right.
And then later on, after everybody sees Laurel's dick, which is a thing that keeps happening, she's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Well, we can be friends now. Just amazing. Just really fascinating.
Well, at that point, it's like, okay, nope, now I understand your deal.
Exactly. It was the cognitive dissonance that was getting right to me. Now that I understand it, it's fine. And I'm
yes.
like, all right.
I think it's also, though, that part of this was part of why all the other tweens the ones who do dislike Laurel dislike her, is because she's such a tryhard. And
yes,
and it's like, okay, these are basically children who've been kidnapped / bought from their parents by and large. They don't want to be here.
It's the same thing that underlies TERF ideology, right? I mean, I think this book understands this very well. Is when womanhood is, having been taken away from her family and slogging through the mud and the forest and being attacked by bandits and, having to kill for your food. When that's womanhood, which is what this book posits, womanhood is. How infuriating is it that somebody, A, wants to opt into that when they didn't have to, and B, is like, I really love being this.
Isn't it great, guys? We're
Right.
going to stir things for a while.
This is, I'm going to cook and I'm going to clean and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Isn't being a woman great since I chose to do it, unlike the rest of you?
Right, but the thing that I do really enjoy about these girls is that most of them, when they find out why Laurel is such a tryhard, they're like, oh, okay, no, that actually makes sense. You're not doing it to rub our face in it. You just really do have to try extra hard to, like, establish your woman cred. Okay, no, actually, like, you're still not going to be our favorite person, but now we don't find you nearly so annoying.
Right. Which I think is the book's thesis. It's like...
Right, is that, like, actually, you should look at at trans women who want to opt into this and go, okay, cool.
Yes. And but also specifically, like, if you just explain yourself correctly, the kind of feminists that you think are cool and who generally don't like you will accept you. You just have to really prove yourself. You have to kill the boar,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not commenting on the accuracy of that as a belief.
But it's a nice sort of world to posit.
Yes, 100%.
Where, and I did enjoy that sort of, like, because I liked actually that people have to be won over, and sometimes, and a few people have to be won over to accepting the trans girl. Most of them just have to be won over to not hating the annoying girl.
Yes.
And that actually the opportunity to show trans allyship ends up being a way that the annoying girl can win them over, because they're like, well, you might be annoying, but I don't want to be a bigot.
Oh boy, is it not ever thus?
Right? But, like, I found that actually really charming.
Yeah. No, like I said,
as a worldview. There's a lot of worldview stuff in this book that I find either objectionable or just baffling, but that's something that I actually found really charming.
it's like, again, I'll poke my head up again and be like, despite the fact that I don't think that I agree with the politics of this book in any way, I still found this book very charming. And, I think that it's like, I think that if you find yourself in a situation where this milieu is the thing that you really want to be a part of, I mean, this is as fine a way of trying to explain how that makes sense as any,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we haven't really talked about the plot of the book at all.
Right, okay, so let's talk about the sapling cages, I guess.
I like the sapling cages,
the great visuals.
Yeah, no, those are very cool. It really, I think it really did nail, like, the idea of nature magic being compressed into industrial power,
Yeah.
in whatever way you want to say it. It's a dead tree turning into oil, or, the killing a forest for mining, or however that is. I think it's a good metaphor, and it makes it shiny and appealing and useful, so you understand the stakes, right? As you were saying earlier, because the kids do use it to heal each other from their injuries, including Laurel's just complete idiot injury that she gets. And so it's like, yes, this does to a certain extent shield you from the consequences of your failures, which is, not the worst thing in the world.
And it's shiny and rainbowy.
Yes, and it's aesthetically attractive. So yeah, no, that as a device, as a metaphor, I think that worked really well.
Yeah, and I mean, like, actually, the way that it's introduced, where you see one and they figure out what it is, and they're like, oh, this is really creepy, and then the witch who's, like, going off to investigate goes missing, and then they find, a new sapling cage with a skull, and they're like, oh no, we think we know whose skull this is.
Right.
Just, that's some, like, good, oh, the bad guys are out there suspense building.
So the bad guys have two sides to their plot.
They're called either cage magicians or blighters, depending.
Yeah, that's right, not cagers.
You're combining the two.
Indeed, they have two elements to their plot. One of which is to create these sapling cages, and the other of which is to foment distrust of the people who could stop them, i.e., the witches, by unleashing monsters upon the land along with their blight. And the monsters are interesting. These are sentient monsters. It is demonstrated that the monsters don't really know why they're there.
Yes.
And that and that the summoning process is extremely painful, and that they would have preferred not to be summoned. But what are we meant to believe about what these? I mean, I don't really understand the metaphorical heft of these monsters at all. Should I just not think about it?
I mean, I think part of the point of the monsters is that they're victims too. Like, you're fighting them, but this is one of those things where you realize they're not the real evil. The real evil are the people who are summoning them.
Sure. So it's like
this is just one of those things of it felt to me like it was trying to add a slight extra layer of moral sophistication to the books that came before it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, dealing with like orcs is always a problem if you're writing a fantasy book, you know.
Right.
What are we to do with the inherently evil sentient races that Tolkien put in there because he was a massive colonialist racist? And the answer is, for some people, is to jettison them entirely, and for some, it is to complicate them. And this one doesn't complicate them enough to make them not monstrous, but it does complicate them enough to make them slightly less jarring, I guess, within this realm.
Yeah, well, I think also just it makes the bad guys even worse. It's one thing to summon monsters. It's another thing to, torture monsters by summoning them to a place that they don't belong and that they aren't happy.
I guess it's an invasive species kind of a thing, almost.
Yeah. Except that the invasive species isn't happy to be there, which I don't think is true of, like, kudzu.
Or deer.
Right.
Speaking of the fawn. But I assume that was a native fawn. Actually, overpopulation caused by anthropogenic changes to an environment isn't good even if the critters are native. Like with deer, for example. My theory is that Laurel is like this because she caught a prion disease from that fawn she was sharing the pond with. The book does a thing which I think that it didn't really follow through on, unfortunately, where it is like, oh, black isn't an evil color. It's the color of possibility in the soil and growth. It's the witch's color is black.
Right.
Which felt to me like we're doing anti-blackness here.
Yes.
In unsubtly, but thumbs up.
That's fine, yeah.
Although, unfortunately, all of the evil miasma power does tend to be black after that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely felt like it was there to make a point, and then was not like really integrated into the overall. Except again that the evil is bright rainbows.
That is true.
Is white light and rainbows. So like.
It's not consistent, but you definitely get the feeling that the intentionality is there at all points. Mm-hmm. Hey Isaac, can you shut up about politics for like 5 minutes? No, I can't, but I'll do 3.5.
Let's talk about the love interest.
Yes.
Arne, right?
Yeah, and that. Arne is the daughter, or the adopted daughter of a fawn, and fawns
not fawn as in the small deer that Laurel
yes, not that kind
of
fawn. Fawn are in this are like gender fluid ancient spirits.
It's a sort of a fawn dryad mashup.
Yeah, I guess they are actually called dryads now that I think about it. But the first one that we meet is mask presenting, which is why my brain went to fawn. But that first one that we meet is in fact her dad, who is a transmasculine dryad critter. And I liked her character a lot because she has this sort of balance of, like she has the egoism of having been brought up by a supernatural creature to be a witch, which also makes her unpopular with her peers, which I appreciated. but also sort of when she hits the end of her rope, like the end of that competence, she gets kind of lost.
Sort of unpopular among her peers, isn't like because don't Laurel and Deide kind of have a rivalry going for her attention?
Yes, it's more. I guess that it's more like the girl who hates everybody doesn't like her.
Also, Deide's friends don't like her because Deide has a crush on has possibly a platonic crush, but like Deide also wants to impress her.
Yes. But what about her beyond that? Were you noticing?
Well, I mean, it's also just it's really interesting how she's handled. Where she's like, I don't, I support your plan to transition, but I've never been interested in another girl before, and it's possible that if you transition, I won't be interested in you anymore either.
Yeah, no, this felt like this fell into a category of things about this book that just felt very straightforwardly to me one trans person sharing like here are some common things that you'll experience in life as a trans person with the younger generation, and which felt like yes, cool, great, this is useful, this is valuable, like this is definitely something that people run into in their relationships, is when it's one of the things that you have to consider when you're coming out as trans. Another one of them is that I'm cut off before I can say what the other one is, but it's Laurel looking at the girls bathing in the stream and wondering if she's attracted to them or if she just wants to be them, which is a trans lesbian conundrum of long standing, or so I am told. Also, for someone who claims to be demisexual, or at least describes that state in so many words, Laurel spends a lot of the book thinking about how hot all the other kids are, and some of the adults.
Yeah, so it's interesting because RNA is very much like RNA doesn't want Laurel to be a boy. She's actually she almost seems kind of happy that she's found finally the one girl she can be interested in.
Right. There's a whole bunch, and and also this leads, as we mentioned earlier, into do you get the surgery or not discourse,
right?
Which, and there's a surprising amount of that for a fantasy novel about child witches adventuring through the countryside.
I've noticed these days that like every fantasy seems to mention in one place or another that there's definitely transition magic out there. Usually, right. Actually, it's just sort of it's often just like tossed in as an aside of, oh, like the School of Mance has one line about, oh, I recognize this girl as somebody who's waiting until she's graduated to get her transition spells.
Yes.
But and this one, even though the surgery, this one makes it seem a lot more challenging, actually, than magical fantasy transition stuff does these days.
Which I liked. I thought
yes,
that was very
absolutely.
Good.
I really thought, like, it's not, there's a lot of different steps to this. There's the social ones, and there's the difficult, and there's like getting, the knowledge access. And then even when you have the knowledge, it's like, okay, you need, somebody to swap a chunk of bone with you and stuff like that.
Right. There's the resources, and then there's like there's actual physical, harm. Well, harm is a loaded word.
But physical pain.
There's physical pain involved.
It's going to be physically difficult and painful, even
exactly.
if it is giving you even if it is giving you exactly what you want. And we know that like there's because there's the example of the one witch we don't get to see, but there's Dame Catkin, who we hear about as the last witch to successfully transition, and it seems like she was living her best life. So great, but still, getting there is not going to be easy.
Yes. I think that I would perhaps have preferred, like, if we're going to use this metaphor, to not involve it swapping bones with a cis woman being a necessary part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, in a way, I mean, the thing is that there's the symbolism there is, yeah, but there's also this sort of metaphorical heft of you can't, you need support from people, like you need the sign off of people who are established.
That is true. Yes.
This is, generally transition, especially when you're young, you're not going to be able to when you're 13 or 15 is not something that you're going to be able to do without convincing cis people to go along with it. And that's
yes, I think
accurate.
in that sense, yes, no, that is very effective. I think the whole, I think that as you say, the fantasy settings where these are spells that you can do by yourself, don't really reflect the actual weight and challenge of this. And so, yes, that is good. It's just that specific detail that you need to cause an equivalent amount of physical discomfort to a cis woman in order to transition is maybe not super fortunate.
Yes. But I think that it's supposed to be less about the equivalent amount of discomfort and more that, you need to have, part of it's just you need to have a cis woman who cares about you enough.
Yes.
And I don't actually necessarily agree with that, but this is a really interesting thing about this like specific kind of, hardcore radical feminist right?
There's too many isms.
There's too many isms, but something that's about this sort of system is that it does, because you can't, is that it is in some ways a rejection of a sort of queer separatism. The idea that actually we should all retreat into our entirely queer communities and we don't want the cisheads in there. And, and we should all be T for T, and that that's the best way to do things.
Yeah. And I have no opinion about that.
The thing is that I don't find either of those particularly, compelling, because, nature abhors most absolutes. But
yes, of course. I want us to take on nature abhors most absolutes. I want to retain that one from this book.
Yes. The thing is that I actually think it is interesting and not 100% bad to see somebody positing a world where we do have to have, as somebody who loves my cis friends and family, to see a sort of a world positing where transness is good and everyone around you should be, you should surround yourself with allies. And ideally other trans people, which is definitely a problem in this book, is the kind of lack of other trans people. But that actually you do need to still exist in a society. Even because this isn't even 100% feminist separatist. They still have, form these, positive relationships with especially the various knightly orders, which are mostly gender integrated. So this idea that even if you're going to have your all women commune, you're still going to have dudes come in and out. It's rejecting all forms of separatism in an interesting way, given the setup of the witches go off into the woods and they live only as witches, and that it's all women, and the only thing we're changing about that is that we also allow trans women.
Yes. I think that this book is very clear that we live in a society.
But which is a fascinating thing to see from an anarchist work.
Well, I mean, I think that anarchists spend a lot of time thinking about how we live in a society, because they spend a lot of time thinking about how society can continue to function without a king or a president or, the powers that be.
Right, but a lot of times the conclusion seems to be, we won't live in a society anymore. Everyone will just be perfect.
Now, this might be because I was at the Ithaca Zine Fair where the anarchists were set up 2 booths down next to my wife, and that one of their zines was entitled Affinity Groups, a powerful tool for building anarchism.
Right, which, good job, anarchists. A lot of anarchists I meet do not do that.
Yeah, it's. I think the more advanced thinkers along these lines understand that we should probably continue to live in a society, even if it's going to be a primitive one or partially primitivist one.
Yes, and there's actually there's a lot of anarchists, including a lot of local anarchists, who really are the let's start with mutual aid and build out from there approach, which I
Yes.
think is a much better one.
Which is the closest thing to my politics that exists in the world.
Right? Yeah, same.
So there you go. You know.
No, I'm a huge fan of let's start with mutual aid and build out from there. And so again, it's not something that I necessarily see posited in speculative fiction, particularly YA, particularly like, queer YA. So it's cool. Like, I think it's cool to see somebody playing around with these ideas. Like, you see it in science fiction, and you see it in some fantasy, but it's fairly rare, and I enjoy seeing somebody else play with it. I guess there's also some Le Guin in here, in this DNA.
Yeah. And like, if it weren't for a few details, like the contempt for femininity,
Yes,
I would have been more on board in general with the whole deal. But there you go. So yeah. So what a fascinating book. I think that, I mean, weirdness aside, I think that I think this is a fine book for folks for a young person to chew on and to think about.
right. Because I feel like books for young people do not need to be, and honestly shouldn't be, perfectly morally, coherent and in line with one's own morals. One of the things that I liked about this book is that it actually does have some of the weirdness of the books that I read as a young elementary schooler.
The reason we spend so much time talking about political symbolism in this episode is that this book is definitely interested in imparting political lessons. It's actively didactic, but the lessons it's interested in don't neatly correspond to any one extant ideology, lending it a fresh, not to say anarchic, feeling. I have one last question, which is why the hell did they go in the cave?
I'm not
with
sure.
With the snakes. I kept going back and thinking about that and being like, what? This is just causing the plot to happen. What's happening? Right
Yeah,
now?
I mean, honestly,
sense.
they're kids, and kids do stupid things sometimes.
Sure,
Like,
that's fine.
The adult, honestly, the adults failed them.
Yeah, sure. I'll accept that. I will accept that.
So,
Yeah.
also, actually, I thought, speaking of sort of being the kids and adults failing them, I did think that the end where you have all the younger generation representing all the different kinds of groups being like, okay, actually, we're the most important, our sort of generational bonds should outrank our loyalty to our affinity groups, was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that as an idea.
No, me too, but I think that I thought that it somewhat undermined, in a good way, it undermined some of the absolutism of the good versus evil battle of the witches.
This is true.
Of saying, actually, it's okay to be a little bit skeptical of the good guys too.
There is also this thing where it's like, when the witches are basically, when the ally witch is saying to the group, this trans teen is here to join us and to strengthen us, not to change us. I don't think she's right.
Yeah.
I don't even think the book thinks she's right.
No. And again, this is, I think that this, there are just little ways that the book undermines some of its own theses, and I think that some of that is deliberate, and I think that makes the book better.
Yeah. And why shouldn't it be messy? The world is messy.
Exactly.
One's wants and needs are messy. Politics are messy. Yeah. And I would, in this world, I would be a knight errant.
Well, yes, absolutely. The knight errants definitely have the best.
But I don't understand why anybody would choose anything else.
Yeah, no, this is why, like, Daidi was my favorite character. I was like, yeah, nope, I get you. Good. She did exactly what I wanted for her, which was to run away and join the knight errants.
Yes. So thank you for giving us that as an option in this universe. I understand what you're into, and, bless you. Yeah. I will be over here. All right. Do we have anything else before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so. I guess the other thing I wanted to say about Arne was just, what did you make of her at the end being like, I will do it. I will be the cis woman who gives you part of the bone.
I think that's an easy thing to say when you're 13 or however old she is.
Right, but also it's just sort of, is this her saying... I liked that it was ambiguous, that you couldn't tell if it was her saying, I will love you, I will still be into you. I've decided now that I will still be into you if you're a girl. Or if she was saying, I've decided that I personally think your transition is more important than whether or not I continue to find you attractive. Or does she even know? Because, like, these are...
Yeah, I would say it's like nobody knows. I mean, at 13, you don't know what you're going to be into in 5 years, or 10
right,
years.
But
I think
do you know that you don't know?
Well, that's the thing about all of the tweens in this book. All of the tweens in this book have highly developed therapy speak knowledge about what they want and need.
Except for Laurel.
Except for poor Laurel.
So, yeah. No, again, I thought it was interesting, and I want to, there's a lot of things in here where I want to read the next 2 books just to see how they play out, because I want to know, because I can interpret them several ways, and I want to see which way the author is interpreting them.
Well, by all means, just tell me.
Yeah, I'll do it and report back. I won't make you read them. Don't worry.
Yes. All right.
All right. I think we're good.
I think we are good. The next thing that we're recording is a bonus episode with Heather Rose Jones.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Of Daughter of Mystery fame. And
then who knows what we're doing next? I mean,
who knows what we're doing.
We have something scheduled, but our lineup is always subject to change.
We're mercurial.
We sure are.
In these things. All right.
All
Until whatever it is.
Yep.
So long,
Thanks.
folks.
Bye.
So there's a torturer in this book who sings while he works. He's improvising his own little tune about what he's doing to the children he has captured, and in his defense, and in the defense of all aimless office whistlers and singers. No, there's really no defense to it, is there? I'm filling your space, whether you want me to or not. Ha ha.